Now, his admirers call him the great sage, a scholar venerated for his wise, prudent, and judicious analysis of Nigeria, Africa, and the world at large, an academic savant who renders all that reflection with eloquence. I'm talking about Professor Udenta Udenta, who's written 21 books and innumerable articles. And in those works can be found the nuggets of his economic, social, and political theories, all of them condensed into his very practical philosophy of African welfarism. His writings and speeches are all aimed at assisting Nigerian and African societies to change themselves for the better. With Nigeria, he's proffered lots of answers, navigating from the history of colonialism through to military and civilian governments. But how do you solve Nigeria's seemingly unsolvable problems when each government falls far short of addressing the issues, each one performing worse than the one before it, failing to apply the solutions that he and so many other internationally recognized Nigerian minds have proffered? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by the man himself, the distinguished fellow of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, Professor Udenta Udenta, who's also the founding National Secretary for the Alliance of Democracy. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, it's an honor once more to present myself before you, Charles.
Well, we're honored that you have presented yourself before us.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, because that is what a lot of people are curious about. People see you today, and they think, what an articulate man whose clarity of thought is infectious. But how have you evolved to this point?
Sometimes the path or the pathways to destiny are inscrutable. It's not something you can capture in cadences. They're magical moments. And if you have that extraordinary gift to discover who you are early enough in life, you will at some point in future say, yes, this was that curve that set me in motion. Possibly I made a self-discovery at the age of 13. That's when I started writing profusely. And I wrote extravagantly for 1.5 years till I was 14 and a half, putting out close to 17 manuscripts. And I preserved them as a covenant with God that they would see the light of day someday. And they saw the light of day 2015, 2018, almost 40-something year time lag. I put out novels, complete novels, short stories, drama texts, philosophical musings, social commentaries when I was 13, 14 years. And some of the thoughts, my thoughts then, still resonate powerfully with me today in midlife. At 16, I led a student rebellion, a very massive one, successfully. At 17, I challenged the dominant elite structure in my community. At 18, I was leading the Marxist youth movement. And ultimately, I was part of the pro-democracy agitation. Suffered 6 detentions, Secretary of Alliance for Democracy. Here we are today. My first major scholarly work was Revolutionary Ecstatics and the African Literary Process, composed 1986 when I was 22, 23. Today, a classic of modern African cultural studies and critical theory. In essence, I see life, my life, of being composed of 2 variables, intellectual conscience and praxis. How do you utilize some modest gifts, intellectual gifts and endowments in the matter of Antonio Gramsci or Edward Said or some of those grand thinkers?
And I think the key word there is praxis.
The praxis.
Because you had to make it practical.
Because my first intellectual biography has a subtitle, A Personal Journey from Intellectual Conscience to Praxis. I've felt that scholars should not limit
Praxis
themselves.
is such a Marxist term, though, isn't it?
Well, you see, people don't understand that praxis is actually motion. Praxis is not practice, action. It is theory in action. There is that spectrum from theoretical thought or theoretical production to practical life. So if you have enormity of theoretical production, but you do not have the capacity to transform those thoughts into societal benefit, there's something is lacking.
I mean, you've written, at least that's the one we know about, the published ones. Because, I mean, there are probably a lot of others that we haven't seen that are manuscript.
A lot of them.
But you've written 21 books, and you've written dozens of articles for newspapers, journals, magazines, and so on. which would you say qualifies as your magnum opus? It's a difficult question.
Difficult question, but for me, at the level of a boyhood creator, an imaginative reconstructor or mediator of life as a child, The Wrath of the Gods is a novel, epitomizes my understanding of the bucolic African condition, pre-colonial condition, the rustic village life, a magical realism.
You think that was bucolic?
Well, in a sense, because in a way, it has to now capture both the essence of what you can consider in the European imagination, the primitive essence of Africa.
But to you, that was ideal.
Ideal.
Right.
And magical realism has an ontological force. How do you construct the identity of a people? Now, revolutionary aesthetics, an African literary process, for the very fact that they have dominated the scene for almost 30 years and produced tons of scholars, generated, literally speaking, hundreds of master's degrees and a lot of doctorate degrees. And a lot of Nigerian professors and global professors of literature owe their career substantially to that work. It's a work I composed almost as a child. I was 22, hadn't earned even a master, not to talk of a PhD, and yet I felt that passion to say something new. It is in uttering something new that I caused an epistemic rupture between the old tradition of critical practice in African literature to a new thesis called revolutionary aesthetics. Now I wrote out produced another work called Crisis of Theory in Contemporary Nigerian Literature. It's beyond literature, it is cultural studies, it is social transformation, it's the idea of merging the Western, radical aesthetics with African transcendental materialism.
Dialectical process, basically.
So that work hasn't seen the measure of intellectual illumination in the hands of scholars.
Right.
Hopefully, it will take its pride of place as one of the
So let me take as the take-off point then, the Wrath of God, which you talked about, that you wrote as a young man. I mean, you had that idealism. The word you used was bucolic. After all that time, using that as the takeoff point, you've been speaking publicly, engaging with political parties, with candidates, with governments, and Nigeria is still where it is. Are you increasingly questioning the relevance of your enterprise?
I'm not going to question that, and for my intellectual and ideological, companions, when I make reference to Nietzsche, of course, Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yeah, Friedrich Nietzsche,
no,
the German.
A conservative, rational philosopher. Why quote him? I said, no. I find him and the sense of illumination very important in this question you asked me. He believes in dwelling at the mountaintop, and that the noise of politics, the din and noise of politics, and the value of life is beneath his content. That means I write not because I want people to read and understand me. Generations to come will crack the codes of my writing that I'm not known today. Is perfectly normal, because to know me today is the exhaust possibilities of my works. That means 50, 100 years, people could still start interpreting Zarathustra. In a sense, whether the generation I find myself is not prepared for this kind of intellectual heat or force we're generating, I have nothing to worry, because 150, 100 years, 200 years, when we are no more here, generations coming after will say, oh my God, people like this lived and can learn lessons.
And yet,
from that.
The whole point, because you have made that point quite stridently here, that you moved from theory to praxis, practicalizing that journey of intellectual to sort of making things more sort of practical.
Absolutely.
And therefore, it is important to you that you see the germination of that practice.
Incrementally, it happens. Every generation creates heroes out of rupture. Moments of societal almost decomposition will lead to something unique. When Babangida annulled the June 12 and Abacha, heightened the contradictions that Babangida generated and saw us in and out of detention, we didn't lose hope. We felt that we were on the cusp of new dawn, that out of the chaos and disorder of that moment, something will thrive for the country. And it did. When he died and Abiola unfortunately died, it was a new beginning. Yes. And we were part of that new beginning. So I found myself as Secretary of Alliance for Democracy, not because I didn't love my teaching in university or my writing. I was to be assessed as a professor, associate professor 1996, 97. I abandoned all that. Suffered, my career suffered, was stunted because of Nigeria and democratic possibilities. And it happened. When Obasanjo came in 1999, even we opposition party rallied around the new democratic order to drag Nigeria from that nadir of existing to something much more clement. So it happened. It has incremental success. But the debilitating condition of the post-colony, in terms of this construction of democracy in the past 25 or so years, is disheartening.
So you're disappointed.
But you don't lose hope. I will give you one instance of where one will not lose hope. Yesterday, if you observe, I'm not jumping any gun, almost all the papers in this country carried some funny news from the National Bureau of Statistics. 3-point-something growth, almost defining the sense of unrestrained celebration on the part of government that use strategic communication tools to permeate the media space with that. I'm happy that OPS, organized private sector, usually friend of the government, disowned that piece of data, said this is nonsensical because we are employers of labor. We know what is going on. And let us see what he did the same. So when you find that a government of the day that ought to be democratic in nature is reliant on fake data, that such an important body has put out, therefore diminishing its legitimacy and credibility in the minds of Nigerians, that will tell you that something is really amiss in the country. For a government to have lost its way completely, to say we don't have solution to the daunting political, economic, and social crisis that we have to leverage on a data about 3.30% growth rate and a reduction in unemployment as a signal to a new beginning, that is sad. So for me, from 1999 getting to 2024, and this is the hallmark of the regime messaging, it is troubling to say the least.
So what do you think, leveraging on that experience that you have of seeing society both from a theoretical point of view and from a practical perspective, an intellectual point of view, what do you think is behind this failure of each successive government in Nigeria? Everywhere else, or at least in many other countries, administrations strive to improve upon the work of their predecessor. But in this country, things only seem to get worse.
I can tell you some word that come to my mind, and it looks simple, but it's loaded. Accountability. When governments are not held accountable, because of the way and manner the system is composed, then governments that come after governments will not constrain themselves. What is accountability? There is an attempt to fetishization of constitution and constitutional provisions. Election holds, somebody is sworn in. So I am legal. I have a legal place to be in power, but you're not legitimate. Legitimacy doesn't derive from constitutional provisions, from electoral processes. It derives from practice. Again, praxis. Two key things: maintenance of public order and safety and security, and then the welfare and prosperity of the people. So when you fail in these two particulars, as the current Bola Tinubu government has failed woefully in these two particulars, you've lost legitimacy. But you're legal. But when you're not held accountable, as Buhari was not held accountable, you understand that successive governments will be produced in the manner the previous ones have produced. That's one way of explaining it. And to hold government accountable is not the duty of government. The guardrails of democratic governance and protection must come from four multiple sources. Here we are. The fourth estate of the realm, the media is the ground because it's protected by the Constitution. Free speech is very important. Media freedom and then public and personal liberties. 2, civic spaces must be empowered to push back. Organized labor must protect both the laboring masses and the overall society. And 2, opposition parties, apart from nationality groups. These are the entities that must push back on any government of the day. But when you fail to do so and expect the government to constrain itself, it will not constrain itself. So if you have a Buhari government not constrained, then you have a Bola Tinubu government not constrained, what hope do you have another future government not constrained?
Very solid analysis there. But I wanted to ask you this, because when I look at you, I'm sitting across from you, maybe the audience can't see it, but I can see your eyes blazing with enthusiasm and intellect. Even with all the ups and downs in this country, your passion seems undiminished. How do you sustain
it?
that?
It can't be diminished because one must remain eternally intellectually curious. When you are not curious about life, the puzzles and the riddles of life and existence, when you wake up in the morning, even the sun appearing and the dew and mist melting should give you pause to say there's something new breaking forth. So every day I live, there's something new enchanting for me and for the country. The depressing state of the economy, of politics and political production apart, there must be hope for the younger generation. Because if we who have received the baton from the founding fathers and mothers of this country should drop it, then there's no future for them.
I suppose you have to be obsessed with political, social, and economic change.
I do.
Both practically and theoretically.
Absolutely.
And not give up. Do you say to yourself that all that failure to effect the sort of change that you have advocated and that you seek for this country is just compost for the thing that you hope will grow one day?
Is it when you adopt a model of democracy, which is Western liberal democracy? Again, unfortunately, the prefixes are gone. There's no liberal, there is no Western anymore. It is democracy. I want us to limit it to Western liberal democracy as an inheritance. It's a particular mode of democratic governance, but now universalized as democracy. When you adopt that model, it comes with all its implications and its limit situations. That means you must know it is incremental, it is minimalist in effecting positive change. It's almost like having a vehicle with a Volkswagen Beetle engine and a Ferrari body, and you want it to win a Formula One race. It can't, it crawls. So that sense of crawling, of minimalism, in terms of tackling societal conditions, is what gives you hope that in spite of seeing these oddities around, you seeing the misgovernance every day unfolded before your eyes, there is hope that incrementally, because to do otherwise is to cause fundamental rupture in the system, in a revolutionary sense of it, which will undermine the dictates of that democracy.
In that respect, where do you see things going in this country, heading, for instance, into 2027 and after 2027?
What
are you able to plot the trajectory of this country based on the parapraxis that you see today?
Two things will jump out quickly for me. One, for even the system to manage itself well in terms of the social formation, it must have very strong place in the commanding height of the economy for the state. What happened is the state has been retrenched. The retrenchment of the state by the IMF and World Bank, which has been accelerated under this particular regime, is not only troubling, it is a disaster. It's a disaster for the country. So the state must firmly play its crucial role in the production of education, in terms of health, in terms of social services, in terms of the welfare of the people. While the private sector, we play the overall role in terms of managing certain critical sectors of the economy. That is one. But specifically with 2027 and beyond, like I said, every government that comes has, as part of its mandate, especially this particular government, to dismantle those guardrails that will protect the people and democratic order. One, the opposition parties are racked by crises, sometimes generated from outside. Labor is pushed to the limit of despair. The media is harassed from pillar to post. Civil spaces are shrinking. What we need to do is to start recomposing these spheres and domains. The site of resistance and protest must be reconstituted. Civil spaces must be there. See what happened with the kids who were tried unjustly and illegally. Their story is even gone. They were got out of jail, they rode into a vehicle, they entered the villa, they got a pat on the back, got biscuit and Fanta. Bye-bye, here you go. The IGP not held accountable, the Attorney General not held accountable, the prison officials not held accountable. I didn't see people populate the Unity Fountain the way they did with Bring Back the Girls. We need to see a consort of opposition parties, civil space agitators and empowered civil space leaders, labor and national unions populating that Unity Fountain every day with placard. Say we're agitating for 2 or 3 things. Multi-party democracy. Labor should be left free to do its job. The media must be left off the hook. and civic spaces should shrink.
Well,
if you do that successfully, you may have 2027 that is enchanting, robust, and well animated as democratic context. If you fail to achieve that, you may find this current president and his team stroll back into power leisurely.
On that note, I want to say what a fascinating discussion it's been with you here, as always, but today particularly. Professor Udenta is a distinguished fellow of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. He's also the founding national secretary of the Alliance for Democracy, and clearly a very, very articulate political analyst. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much for having
see you
me.
Again. And that's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.